מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
If everyone has their candles and they would like to light their candles, as we were experiencing technical difficulties earlier, I already lit said candles, but you can please feel free to take the moment to light your candles, and then we can sing the blessing together.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Courtney. The candles behind me had never been lit.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. And we will continue together with singing Shalom Aleichem. And if Rabbi, you can advance the slide so everyone has the words in front of them, and we can all join together. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mi melech malachei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We continue with the Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkadah Shemir Rabbah, Be'alma divrach yirtev yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei kol bet Yisrael, Bagala, u'v'zman kariv, v'yimaru, Amen. Yehei Shemir Rabbah mevarach, ve'halamulal me'almaya, yitbarach, v'yishtabach, yitbahar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yithalal, Shemir dekurasha b'richu. Lahela mikol v'chata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma, v'yimaru, Amen. And we now continue with the Baruch Hu and ask all those who are able to please rise. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach,
continue with Ma'ariv Aravim. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, bechokma poteach she'arim, uvitvona mishanei itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umisader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil bein yom uvein layla, Adonai tzevaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. We continue on in the middle of 133 or on your screen. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol, all these things your Torah gives to us, and the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, לחיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. We continue on page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נצר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נצר בקודש. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מלכותך, מלכותך ואהובניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלינו ואמרו, זה
beit Yaakov, ugolo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch ata Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. בני ובין בני ישראל עוד היא לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
We continue together with the Amidah, and I ask if you are able to please rise. Adonai esufatai tiftach ufi agit ilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'Hanura, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chazei Avot ve'Imot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo be'ahava, Melech Hoseh u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Zerat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, b'chayei hakol atah rav lehoshia, morid atah, mechalkei l'chaim b'chesed, mechayei hakol b'rachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, u'matir asurim, u'mekayem emunato, l'shenei afar, v'yechamocha ba'al givurot, u'mido melach, melech memit u'mechayei, u'matmiach Yeshua, v'ne'aman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayei hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahlelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. You may be seated.
We continue at the top of page 55. May these hours of rest and renewal Open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Ritzei, Ritzei, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'amcha Yisrael, U'tefilatam, Ve'avat tekabel, U'teil ratzon tamid, U'teil ratzon tamid, Avodat Yisrael Amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadcha v'yirah navod, she'otecha levadcha v'yirah
God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom, ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
Take a moment for private prayer and reflection.
יהיו לרצון ימי פי והגיוני ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי אדוני צורי וגואלי
So some Torah portions are more nuanced and harder to summarize in a single sentence or in one phrase, and others are a little bit easier. This week's Torah portion, Parshat Re'eh, is one of the ones where as you read through it, it becomes easy and abundantly clear to find the message in the biblical mind, which is no idolatry. With a little bit of it's still okay to have meat at home, but we won't go there. Why? So if we remember the Israelites, as we're nearing the middle of Deuteronomy, are on the verge of entering into the land of Israel, where God will dispose of the inhabitants, aka idolaters, to make room for Israel to settle. So now why might God be concerned about the Israelites being tempted into idolatry? After all, God's brought them out of Egypt with some pretty nifty stuff, kept them alive, fed them in the desert, is about to wipe out their enemies. If I was a betting person, I'm going to stick with that God, not the God of the people that are about to get wiped out. Well, it turns out, and somebody in the Shmuz and Nosh beforehand referenced my Facebook post earlier in the week taking sermon suggestions, and one of the questions posed was, why did God create memes? So this sermon is a little playful, and I'm going to answer that question with, so that I could do this. So it turns out we humans like to look at the grass that is greener on the other side of the fence, and God seems to be concerned that we are going to do just that. And as the Israelites go into the land, they're going to look around and be a little envious of what's going on, and they'll see idolatry everywhere. And it's a different lifestyle that they may see. They've been wandering in the desert for 40 years, and the people in the land have presumably been a little bit more settled. They might have some interesting things going on, but as we recall, no idolatry. So God reminds them to stay on the straight and narrow throughout this portion. Why? Well, we do have a little bit of a history with idolatry. We'll keep that one in mind. And so God, throughout, post Golden Calf, reminds us that what God is giving us is pretty good. But of course, what ends up happening time and again, idolatry lures the Israelites away. And so it seems perhaps God's fears are a little bit justified, and perhaps God is sitting somewhere saying this. I had way too much fun searching for these. And so the question becomes, as we go into the land and we see other things going on and God's giving us the Torah, how do we know what is true and what is not true? And I also had some fun with word clouds and put the entire translation for the Torah portion into a word cloud, because technology can do that. And so if you look, you see the two, right, camera is flipped, the two biggest words are God, that if we stick with the Torah, we'll be good. So what does all of this say about us today? It's not like we're about to go into the land of Israel. We're not about to dispossess the nations. And I feel a little bit like Dory confessing in Finding Nemo that she's never eaten a fish, that I can't say I've ever been tempted to bow down to my neighbor's statue of Baal. I'm pretty sure my neighbors don't have a statue of Baal for me to even be tempted by. But we know that false prophets leading us away from the truth from the truth and towards the idols of our day are certainly something we face. And while those idols may not be Baal in 2020, we do sometimes serve idols of our own variety in modern times. Some of the things on, right, camera flipped, on this picture are good things. Some of these things may draw us away, but the point being, when they take us away from doing good, they become like idols. So staying on the right and good path according to our Jewish values is a little bit harder now, especially in the age of information that we live in, where the pulpit that the false prophets have to spread information on social media or on the internet seems to be bigger and louder than perhaps it was for our biblical ancestors. Rabbi Carolyn Sim points out that discerning a true prophet from a false prophet isn't easy. And it can't be entirely based on the prophet's track record, because false prophets do sometimes say things that might perhaps be true. Traditionally, some of the reasons that might happen are that they made a good guess, they got lucky, they made an educated guess, that they're plagiarizing something that a true prophet said, or perhaps they were a real prophet and they kind of got their prophecy privileges revoked by God, and now they're not, but they've still got some insider information from their previous days. We can take these examples and put them into modern times. Certainly, I can make a pretty good guess and tell you with a 50-50 shot who's going to win the Super Bowl in any given year. I'm not sure that makes me a prophet when about half the time I'm right. Probably less than half the time, because I may not even know who's playing in the Super Bowl in any given year, besides the point. I or any of us can come across information online and easily share it. And we know that some sources are more reliable and other sources, like The Onion, not so much. But there's so much in the middle. And while we can try and fact check things before we repost them or before we share them or before I stick them in a sermon, I've certainly been guilty of posting things, perhaps meth gators that may have been 3 years old, still funny, and then corrected. And I've certainly given sermons where I've made some analogies in departments that are not my main area, and had some of you that know more come up and say, well, actually, it's a little more nuanced than that. And part of Judaism is admitting when we need to correct information we've put out there. But as we're getting this information from the world, we can't be experts in everything. There's a piece of Talmud that I love in which two reliable, well-respected Torah scholars are debating an issue, and they make set contradictory rulings. And a divine voice comes down and says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim, that these and these are the words of the ever-living God. So they're both true. A and not A are both true, and A and not A are the words of God. And so the tradition takes that little anecdote and basically then poses this student that asks, well, what am I supposed to do? If you're telling me that A and the opposite of A are both true and both what God wants, if the food is kosher and not kosher, what is it? Can I eat it or not? And the answer this student gets is that it's the Talmud, should make his ears like a hopper, basically take in everything and be the one that's sorting through it. And to me, that's kind of the basis of Reform Judaism. It's not that the rabbis or Judaism says and you must do, but that each of us is ideally supposed to take that information and make our own choices to determine what's the good, what's the bad, what's the true, what's the untrue. And whether that's true with a lowercase t or a capital T is a whole different conversation. But as we take in the world around us, what this teaches us is to take in the whole picture, take in the whole of the source and really think about it before acting upon it. Because Judaism wants us to wrestle with the world around us. And so this Shabbat, amid our whole crazy world, I dare you to seek the truth and find the peace, even if it's the less popular option. And with that, I will say, Well, I won't say Shabbat Shalom. I will do one quick thing here so that the camera doesn't flicker now that I don't need to. Come on, camera, come back. That is the back of my computer. Sometimes changing cameras makes this work. Ta-da! Okay. Now that I'm done flashing fun pictures at you, we'll take a moment to pray for those in need of healing. In a few moments, we will turn, and I got my pages all out of order like I always do. But as a congregation this Shabbat, we pray especially for Jan Berman, Jerry Butter, Robin Moore, Stephanie Noble, Gail Russick, Melinda Glovka, Jim Hedger, Ezra Melech ben Rachel Sarah, Mike Ammons, Helen Fine, Jeremy Wise, Paul Levine, Ed Bulin, Harvey Olson, Christine Wagner, Candace Smith, Tracy Huddleston, Joe McKenna, Ellen Goodrich, Mark Romanowski, Jerry McDonald, Richard Lieberman, Joel Pinsker, Ralph Schwartz, Marty Sacker, Sandy Sapphire, Laura Holtzinger-Levin, Abraham ben Abraham Visara, Bob and Gert Kahn, Dave Bussey, Ron Levine, Jay Bainbridge, Chelsea Smith, Shava Etta, Rory Freisler, Bernice Brandt, and Deborah Seidel. There are other names that we ought pray for. I invite you to think of them in your heart since you are all muted. As we turn to the words of Misha Berach, which can be found on page 253 or on the screen in front of you.
Sheberach Avotenu Mekol HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings healing to the sick. I ask that those who are able rise as we turn to page 282 or the screen in front of you for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabach l'Adon hakol, לתת גדולה לארצי בראשית, שלא עשנו פגעי ארצות, ולא שמנו משפחות האדמה, שלא שם גלגנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo Echad.
And as we begin to conclude our service, we think of those who are no longer with us. We think especially this Shabbat of those who died recently. As a congregation, we are in a period of Aninut for Shirley Ross, and in a period of Shloshim for Ken Lotney, Maxine Weinberger, Sidel Ballas, Emily November, Jack Ling, and Edith Greengold. And we recall those who have died at this season in years past with the yard sites of Robert Adler, Johanna Asher, Emil A. Asher, Stanley J. Brown, Clara Burke, David Day, Lucy Dorsey, Bernard M. Frank, Raymond G. Frankel, Louise Friedman, A.M. Friend, Ruth E. Froelich, Mildred Gitman, Louis Green, Stephen Green, Ben Harlan, Jean Kamen, Sid Kaplan, Tassili Kynes, Grace Kupferberg, Charles M. Leon, A. Joe Levy, Lawrence S. Patterson, Joseph E. Pataski, Rebecca Well Rao, Alan Rosen, William A. Schimmelman, David Schumann, John Stephen Schwartzman, Jack D. Schleyer, Albert David Slutzker, Ruth R. Steinberg, J. Edward Wasserman, and Walter Zuckerwise. There are other names that ought to be added to our list or pronounced more correctly. I invite you to do so in your hearts or out loud in your homes as we continue with the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. Yit Gadal Vit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, V'alma Divrach Hirotei V'yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon U'v'yomechon U'v'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, B'agala U'v'zman Kariv V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam U'lamei Amaya. Yit Barach V'yish Tabach V'yit Pa'ar V'yit Romam V'yit Naseh. V'yit Hadar V'yit Haleh V'yit Halal Shmei Dekudesha Brichu. Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata. Tushbechata V'nechemata. Da'amiran B'alma V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imrumav. Hu Ya'aseh Shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories always and only be for a blessing.
And as we conclude our service, I invite, if you have a glass of fruit of the vine, whether it be of the alcoholic or the non-alcoholic version, join you in raising our glass together as we share in Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, v'ahava uvratzon inchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit. Ki hu yom techila lemikrei kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim ki vanu b'charta ve'otanu kirashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodecha ve'ahava uvratzon Ilchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat L'chaim. L'chaim.
We now continue with the words of Motzi.
A very teeny challah.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'tei avon.
Shabbat Shalom. Feel free to unmute yourselves